something started to disturb me, which is the idea that in Buddhism, we are always saying that Buddhism is the religion of boundless compassion, the religion of loving kindness, tolerance, forgiveness, peace, and so forth. But it seemed, and this is what the meditation teachers are teaching, but it seemed too often that the way Buddhism is practiced is you go into your little room, you light the incense on the altar, light the candles, and then you sit down and may all beings be well, may all beings be happy, may all be free from suffering. And then you come out and it's how compassionate I am. When it comes to actually, putting your nose to the grindstone, something seemed to be missing. Okay, so this went on, these kind of thoughts simmering in my mind for the next few years. Then this magazine, Buddha Dharma, asked me to write, they call it a commentary, it's like an editorial essay. So I wrote that essay expressing my thoughts about the situation of Buddhism in the US. It tends to be, I have to be a little bit critical of it, but generally a white middle class or upper class intellectual elite form of spiritual method of cultivation. And so that was the theme that I expressed in that essay. And some of my students, I didn't show the essay to anybody, when I didn't show the magazine, but some of them read the essay, which Buddha Dharma gave their own title to it, A Challenge to Buddhists. And so when my students read it, they came and spoke with me and they said that, we have to step up to the challenge in that essay. Then we had some initial discussions, and then out of those discussions, in 2008, Buddhist Global Relief was born.
So I came about it in a much different way. I was opening up a hermitage in the mountains of North Carolina, a place that people could come and cloister. Coming in, I felt like as a Christian, I had done all of my service. Now my time's getting short, I'm getting old, and I really needed to batten down the hatches and really work on my own cultivation. But then when we got there and the need became apparent, I said, well, what will we do? We have this beautiful facility. When things are going well, we should sit and meditate. When things are not going well, we need to get up off the pillow and we need to do something. And so that's what I did. Of course, I lost half of my Sangha because they wanted to come and sit and do nothing. But that's okay,
Well, I should add that when I established Buddhist Global Relief, I did lose a couple of my very close monastic friends.
Yes, I did.
I gained some new ones.
It is wonderful.
And so all my life I was more or less involved in political, social, and environmental issues. What I was seeing was burnout. I was seeing self-righteousness. Oh boy, that turns me off. I have the answer. This is the issue. And of course blame that goes with that. So when I met this Tibetan community of Tashijong from the Khargyu Nyingma lineage, when I was in India in the mid-early 60s with the American Peace Corps, I was there with our children. My husband was working on the staff. And I met these and was working with these refugees recently out of Tibet that while they were sick, they had no antibodies against the diseases of the plains, and they were hungry, and I didn't ask for teachings. I just worked to try to get them economically centers they could stay together, the lay people and the lamas and rinpoches, and they still are, 40 years later, 50 years later. But it was their way of being, just So I, as I was telling you, I just before I had to leave, I got teachings from a Tibetan Buddhist nun who wanted me to start with Theravadan practice, with Satipatthana. And but what when I began to see, first through anatta and then this core teaching of the Lord Buddha about our radical inter-existences, our emptiness of self. But that emptiness, I think I was so grateful to Thich Nhat Hanh for putting it in terms of interbeing instead of emptiness, because I saw people kind of zoning out into emptiness. And but that and so I thought there, immediately it was just like that, because all the religions I saw teach loving kindness, they do. All of them teach compassion, they do. All of them talk about justice, they do. You know, there's always a strain there. I got a lot in my life from the Hebrew prophets. Ooh. But what was so, the ethics of kindness and sharing, and responsibility that I found in the teachings of the Lord Buddha were really in the other religions as well. But what was different was this core teaching of our interexistence, the Paticca Samuppada, and how we can. So what I'm doing now, and ever since in my life, is growing understanding and sharing that this dependent co-arising in how we treat each other, and that the sorrows and misery and suffering is not because of some satanic deity, it's not some evil principle, but it's because of the co-arising of greed, hatred, and delusion. And that, I mean, this is phenomenal. What an idea. And then that these greed, hatred, and delusion take institutionalized forms.
Exactly.
And we see it right in our world today with the consumer society and the corporate rule through greed and the militarism and the media, institutionalized delusion. And that then you can work with people, because you see that they're not the enemy. They're really, most of the people who are getting in the way that are appear as obstacles to the justice work or the environmental work. They're in bondage to these institutionalized forms of greed, hatred, and delusion. Which that's the enemy, not the people. At any rate, this is obvious to you all, but it was.
It isn't so obvious to me. I think one also has to take the view that people make decisions, and that those decisions have ramifications through the system. So I don't think we should cast these people in the role of some kind of monstrous enemies, but we do have to recognize that they are making decisions which are continually reinforcing structures and systems that are benefiting them and casting others into positions of desperation.
However, in times of great fear, which we're in now, there's a terrific magnetism to taking a fundamentalist position.
But this is a habitual tendency. It always happens. It's a continual cycle. It was like that in the 60s. It was like that before. It's like that with all different peoples in all different places. When I got an email inviting me to come and work with the Deletes, this wasn't from a Gandhian organization, or it was from two Delete organizations. And I asked them two questions. Number one, why me? And number two, can't you find any other help? And they said, well, they don't help the delete organizations that much. It has to be other organizations that come in, and that way they can maintain control over how they help and how much help is given, so that the systems can be maintained, but they can take a more acceptable face. Said, and then number two, we were Googling for a black Buddhist monastic, and you were the only one who would come up on the internet for a woman. They wanted a woman at this, you know. And so, and he said, we know that you know something about suffering as a black person in America, and we don't have time to explain it to you or to teach it to you, but we know you know it. If you're still here, you're still speaking, and more than that, if you're loving. You know, and so I said, I understand, and yes, I will come. And when I go there, I see like it's no different than in my own community, and we're very much a minority in the area that I settled in. It had to be a karmic thing because I wouldn't have done it consciously, you know. But here I am. I find myself there, and all of the kids that I serve are white kids, you know. But I go to India now. And I'm working with the Dalits, the descendants of the Dravidians, and I see no difference in these kids and those kids. I see no difference in who they are as human beings, you know, and understanding my own constitutional documents, and that wasn't that long ago that we were considered 3/5 of a human being. You know, and I'm very close to understanding, you know, how they feel there. And they think that, oh, we have the answers because America's straightened out now.
They think America's
straightened out.
What year was this?
This is now.
Oh, you're working in India now?
Yes.
I see. I didn't know that.
Yes. So I went last year was the first year.
I see.
And we adopted 10 villages. I mean, these are villages where they have no water. They have to walk miles to get water every day. The few villages that have water is the sewage water that runs downhill from the township into the cul-de-sac where they live. So they have to pass through the upper caste villages to get out of the little area where they live and to come back. So that's an element of control right there. You know, you have to pass by us to go anywhere and do anything. And then this water, this wastewater, I mean, they wash in it, they cook in it, they bathe in it, their children play in it, you know. They grow food in it.
This is a situation which is going to increase more and more in this world as pure, clean water becomes more and more of a luxury. Very few people will have.
When I sat with my Mahayana sisters and brothers, and I found something in not being afraid to use the F word, faith, you know, and finding some space for the arousal of a devotion that purifies and clarifies things for you, and putting them together, you know, found not just like lost my mind and found my heart, you know, so you can get this like this Bodhi mind, and then this emergence of just a compassionate heart that produces that interbeing. It's not a thing somebody can teach you. It just has to emerge. It has to unflower and unfold in you. And I think that just the, you know, so I'm so grateful, you know, to be, I'm Theravada in the morning and I'm Mahayana in the afternoon, you know, because
Many of us are.
I get it. You know, you heard it. We couldn't say it before Bhikkhu Bodhi gave some understanding around the concepts of some unification of thought here. So again, you know, we're very grateful. I mean, if I say it, I mean, what do I know? I'm not a scholar. But one who has practiced it and walked it, you know, for decades, and who knows it, you know, altogether the way we can accept it, it's been handed down, begins to say it, then people can hear it, and they get free because they have enough courage to step into it, you know, to look and see, come see. And then there's and with this joy and this happiness comes a natural inclination towards serving others and relieving suffering.
Yes, come come and see. I am so grateful for having begun and still have as my root practice the Vipassana out of the Theravada because of the training of the mind to pay attention. And that this is desperately needed in our world today, particularly in this country. And I have used mindfulness practice as an assignment in classes I've taught, which are not about Buddhism, but about public world events, social conditions, what we are doing to the living body of Earth, the contamination, the poverty, the political repression and torture. These are things we need to see. And so I would assign to my students who are not Buddhists, I mean this would be not to learn this practice so you can find, because when you're sitting doing satipatthana, there's a lot of garbage you see. It's coming up, the things that are coming up in your own thoughts and minds, that you just look right at it, you know, and you see things you don't like, but you just, you learn how to be, right? And so the same with our world. We can learn to see what is happening with our world, and we can't begin to do anything until we do that. And then that attention, that sharp attention, we develop. Oh, praise be for that. Because you know, of course, when you keep paying attention, it turns to tenderness, it turns to love. We all experience that. Not knowing is so beautiful because it relieves you of having to assume a fundamentalist dictatorial, you know, having the last word. And it's a natural expression of our radical interrelatedness because you're part of a whole, and that part cannot know the whole of which it is a part. So that's just epistemologically just inevitable. I find that the intention is a great guide there, particularly and more strong for me in the last decade or so, this concept, and experience of bodhicitta. And I had known it as I'm going to get enlightened so I can serve everybody. But it somehow got turned around backwards, or I'm going to act for the welfare of all. And so first I get enlightened, and I better focus because it can feed into an idea of it being sequential. I will sit down and get enlightened, and then I will waltz out into the world and try to be of service. But if and then I see that this amazing yearning, this wish, this sense of our interconnectedness and wanting, working for life to go on, just like that, working for the ongoingness of life. And I see, and just like Paul Hawken made so beautiful in his book, Blessed Unrest, that we're at a time in this planet when there are millions of people who are working beyond their separate self-interest. Now this is colossally important, that there is this yearning inside us for the welfare of all beings. And I have found in my own life and in working with students and the activists that I train and work with or teach this, that with all the uncertainty, it could be the end, that's right. It could be the great unraveling happening before the great turning. But with that bodhicitta, that intention for the well-being of all, is the one thing you can count on. There's nothing else you can count on. I can't count on what you're gonna do, or you, or the BPF, or the White House, or, so the one thing I can count on is what I choose. And I choose to act for that bodhicitta, because that gives me a really great sense of glad, big heart. And then I can face anything.
It's like if you keep on giving somebody food and they don't have a means to provide for themselves, then they'll just, after that food is digested, they need more food. So we have to start addressing what are the roots of global hunger and malnutrition. So as we were inquiring into this, we found at least two of the roots. The subordinate status of girls and women in many traditional societies. And so because of this, women have, or girls have, when they get married, they have many children. Population increases, more and more mouths to feed. And so what we found as a possible solution, at least one line of attack on global hunger, to promote the education of girls, so that when girls receive an education, they have a better understanding of nutrition for their families. They have a more control over their own reproduction, so they don't have to follow the dictates of their husband and father-in-law. And also they'll be able to work and earn to support their families. And also to support women so that women can earn more for their families. So those are, two issues related to global hunger, two ways to address global hunger. Another factor is climate change, which is now making it more and more difficult to grow crops. It's leading to drastic changes in the weather already in Africa, South Asia. And so what we have to do is promote a different type of agriculture, not the giant chemical-intensive industrial agriculture, but ecologically sensitive and sustainable small-scale methods of agriculture. And so all of these issues are interconnected. Then why is, you could always raise the inquiry, why, what does this depend on? Why is the giant industrial model of agriculture so prevalent throughout the world? Because of, I have to say, from pressure from the United States, because it's the US giant agricultural companies and the chemical companies which are promoting that kind of agriculture throughout the world. And how are the chemical companies and the giant industrial agricultural corporations, how do they get such power? Because they control food policy through the politicians.
So since I brought up this whole topic of not knowing, I like to say, we've all already figured out that ignorance is not bliss.
Yeah, right.
And so if we're on any spiritual path at all, we're sort of moving beyond that premise. The next thing that sets in once we get a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of understanding is that we think we know everything. So whatever our experience is becomes the experience. And so we go other places and we begin to speak for other people, what they should do and how they should do it. So this whole idea of coming in not knowing is, as Bhante said, to lay aside your fixed notions that you have the solution. Maybe they have the solution, and there's something that they need from you, which is not the answer, but the means by which they can exercise the solution. So we don't know these things, and so we go in being open to hear what the people have to say. The other part is that, we can't just practice forever. We have to come to the end of practice. We can't just be traveling the road forever. We have to get to a destination. So we should be developing, if our practice is not leading us to the development of wisdom, to the development of insight, then we have to examine what practice that might be, because the Buddha's practice does lead to the Buddha Dharma leads to this. And so as we are undergoing our practice, there is skillfulness that is developing. You didn't have to pick it up and put it in your backpack. It is on that road. So if you're traversing that road, there is skillfulness that you are acquiring, much like dust on your feet that whips up on your shoes. There's no way to not have it, you know. And so, so we started moving in a kind of wisdom is not based so much on tuition, but it appears to be like an intuition, a naturally arising wisdom that is born out of the clarity of our view and our eyesight through our practice. That's why I make no apologies for calling this a spiritual practice. You know, and I'm not ashamed of it. I don't have to make it all secular, and you know, everybody can take in whatever they like, but I make no apologies for it that way, because I have found it to be exquisite in its ability to lift us in a way that goes beyond just our conscious critical thinking into some areas cutting deep and uprooting an ignorance that we find in a very deep space. And so in our meditation, I mean, we can be watching our thoughts and looking at what came next and what came before that and what came before that. And we can roll around in our thoughts with a monkey mind all day long in silence, like meditation. But there is some place that when you are perched at the apex or at the pinnacle of the paradox of reality, and you're stepping in, slipping in, just in the stream, find yourself in this space of no thingness, you know, that starts to destroy all your conceptual, conceptions, your conceptual reality. And when you come back out of that place, out of that water, you come back wet. And it's not your water that you stepped into, but it's this refreshing water of the Buddha Dharma that helps us to see things in a different way, to get in a way that we never even imagined, that was not introduced to us from out here. Our society didn't introduce it to us. It wasn't in our scholarly books, you know, and so there is that aspect of the and in that way, I feel vulnerable if I have to rely totally on the tuition. But stepping into that finding myself in that space of no-thingness, when I come back, there is something that I can use and input in this world that makes a difference, and that creates a change. And so there's no thought or no concept of I came up with it. You know, it was almost like I was accosted by it, you know, and this is what gives us, this is what gives me hope, you know, as a Buddhist, that, you know, I never had a problem with certain concepts. Me and God, we were tight. It was me and you, the way I had that problem, you know, and so that changes that whole dynamic through the development or the unfolding of certain wisdom, clarity, and skillfulness that allows us to contribute to the changes in the world.
I'm so moved when I see how hard people work on retreats. You know, just sitting there, silent, watching, and then the mind goes away, and then bringing it back to whatever the object of meditation is. It's so much hard work, and it breaks my heart to see how often, just as my experience, people are not explicitly given, we're doing this for the sake of all beings. It does sound to me, and I've been through retreats and led by other people, it does feel as if you're sitting there doing this for your own stillness, which sometimes, I must say, feels like premature equanimity. And then if we were to just start out, we are here in a world of suffering, and and face it, so that when you sit with that hard work, you're doing it for the sake of all beings. If there were just that nod to that sometimes, then you'd feel with that hard work, you'd feel like a wind at your back.